1973, Murphysboro, Illinois. A terrifying series of encounters with a huge albino beast started to happen. This beast is now known as the Murphysboro Mad Monster, or the Big Muddy Monster. This huge albino creature struck fear within the small community for 14 days. The first to come face to face with the cryptid was Randy Needham and Judy Johnson. Randy and Judy were parked near the Muddy River when all of a sudden they heard a terrifying roar. They had never heard anything like it before. Randy turned on his headlights hoping to get a glimpse of whatever it was that made that terrifying noise. And right in front of them was a huge ape-like creature heading right towards them. They both started to scream. Randy started his car and he floored it out of there. They were so terrified that they called the police once they got to the nearest gas station. Randy and Judy told the police that this thing was huge. It must have been at least 8 feet tall. Now the odd thing is, the police did take Randy and Judy seriously, but they thought that maybe the young couple's eyes were playing tricks on them, or maybe a hoaxer was having some fun at their expense. The officers decided to go investigate, and right away they stumbled upon some huge tracks. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Then, all of a sudden out of nowhere, the officers heard a terrifying screeching type of sound in the nearby woods. Now this scared the officers, and they ran as fast as they could back to their patrol car. They were pretty shook up. They decided to head back to the station to regroup and to get more men. A couple of hours later, the officers returned to the river, but they only managed to get Randy, the original witness, and another officer. The 4 men decided to follow the tracks in hopes that they could finally get to the bottom of this. Not too long after following the tracks, they started to hear very odd noises coming from the woods. Then, they all heard this creature screech. It sent chills down their spines and they all sprinted back to their patrol car. These guys were scared. The men decided to just sit in the car with their rifles in hand and wait for the sun to come up. The next day, a 5-year-old boy was playing in his backyard when he came face to face with this creature. The young boy ran inside and told his father that he had seen a huge white ghost. The father, of course, just thought his son was playing around. When all of a sudden the neighbor started banging on the door, the neighbor told the young boy's father that there was a huge creature in the backyard. When the father went to go have a look, he uncovered some very big tracks. He just couldn't explain it. Now the whole town was alerted. Over the next 14 days, there were loads more sightings of this creature. And one of the most chilling events happened when a tracking dog picked up the scent and tracked this creature down. The dog followed the scent to a barn, but the dog was so afraid that it just wouldn't go any further. Now the dog's owner knew that this creature was inside the barn, but he too was too afraid to go in, so he called the police. But by the time the police finally got there, all that was left was huge tracks exiting the back of the barn, and the dog was just too afraid to continue the search. Even still to this day, there are sightings of the Murphysboro Mad Monster, but nothing like those 14 days of terror back in 1973. Henry McDaniel and his wife returned home at about 9:30 after a very nice evening out. They were greeted by their 2 children. The children seemed to be a bit panicked. They told their father that something tried to get into the house and was scratching on the front door. Henry told his kids not to worry and that it was probably just a dog or a cat. About an hour later, Henry also started to hear very odd scratching noises at the front door. When Henry opened the door, he expected to see a small dog. What he saw terrified him beyond belief. Henry was face to face with a creature that had only 3 legs, a very short body, 2 very short arms, and 2 huge pink eyes. This creature was standing upright and was almost 5 feet tall. And for some reason, this creature really wanted to get inside Henry's house. Henry was completely mortified by the sight of this horrible creature. Henry slammed the door and rushed to go grab his pistol. When Henry ran back, the creature was still at the front door. Henry opened fire and he was positive that he shot it. This unknown animal hissed at Henry and very mysteriously leaped away. Henry couldn't believe how fast this thing could move. It was able to vanish completely from Henry's sight with only 3 leaps. Henry didn't waste any time. He called the police right away. For some reason, Henry just felt that this creature was evil. The police thought that maybe Henry was on some very powerful drugs. But the police did find some very odd scratch marks on Henry's door. Whatever was scratching on the door had 6 toes. Dogs only have 4. And also, a couple of hours before Henry's encounter, a young boy was attacked by a very mysterious creature. But the police didn't link these 2 encounters together until later. A couple of days later, Henry encountered this creature again. Henry just sat there and looked at it from afar. Then the creature leaped back into the woods. Eventually, the word got out about Henry's bizarre encounters, and everybody was loading up their rifles trying to catch this creature. There was dozens of other alleged sightings over the next couple of months, but eventually everything died down. Now, what gives this creature's existence some very strong credibility is it's very similar to what happened in Mount Vernon. In 1941 and 1942, people in Mount Vernon started having some very terrifying encounters with mysterious leaping beasts. These leaping beasts terrorized the local people. And during that time, there were some very mysterious animal deaths and mutilations. The locals called the creature the Mount Vernon Monster, and Mount Vernon is only 40 miles away from Enfield, Illinois. July 11th, 1972. Two young boys were playing with their dog outside their house. The older sister Doris heard her younger brothers screaming at the top of their lungs. Doris, who was inside the house at the time, ran to the window to see what the heck was going on. Doris saw a huge hairy creature standing by a tree. Doris said that this creature must have been at least 7 feet tall. She said that it stood like a man, but it didn't look like one. Doris was terrified and she ran to the phone to call her mother. Doris and her younger brothers all agreed that this couldn't have been a man. This creature has so much hair that you couldn't even see its face. They also said that this creature had no neck and also smelled really, really bad. Now, if that wasn't scary enough, the children also told their parents that this creature was carrying a dead dog. Edgar, the children's father, rushed home after hearing about this encounter. Edgar went to go investigate, and he did find some huge footprints that were in the dust outside his house. That same evening, a woman who lived down the road started hearing very odd animal noises. She never heard noises like this before, so she called the police. Now, since Edgar was a deacon at the local church, the story of this monster started to spread. A farmer came forward and told Edgar that his dog disappeared, giving the children's story a little bit of credibility, as the children did tell their father that this creature was holding a dead dog. A couple of days later, Edgar was having a regular weekly prayer meeting within his home, when all of a sudden, something started to throw rocks at his house. Edgar knew the kids in that neighborhood wouldn't do something like this. As Edgar was looking out his window to try to find the culprit, he heard a very terrifying animal-like growl. This growl sent chills down his spine. He never heard anything like it before. Eventually, the growling noises started to get louder and louder, and everybody started to panic. Eventually, they couldn't take it anymore, and they all ran to their cars, as the sounds were coming from the other side of the house. Over the next couple of days, there were tons of reports of bizarre smells and strange animal noises. Another sighting happened on July 21st. A man named Ellis started hearing very odd noises. Ellis went outside to go investigate, and he had a very powerful hunting flashlight with him. Ellis saw this huge hairy creature just 20 feet or so in front of him. Ellis was frozen in fear. The creature, alarmed by the flashlight, ran back into the darkness. Ellis told the police that this beast had hair covering its whole face and must have been at least 7 feet tall. Ellis's description was exactly the same as Edgar's children, and Ellis was a very trustworthy and respectable person. After his sighting, mass hysteria started to kick in. People started coming to the small Mississippi town from all over the state in hopes that they too could get a glimpse of this monster. Over the next couple of weeks, there were a lot of huge tracks found, and these huge tracks seemed to come from a creature that only possessed 3 toes, and this only encouraged the mass hysteria. But eventually, everything died down. There were no more sightings of this monster. But the residents of this small Mississippi River town will always remember the Missouri Monster and the mass hysteria that followed in 1972. April 21st, 1977, a man named Billy Bartlett and 2 of his friends were taking a nice little nighttime drive. All of a sudden, a creature caught Billy's eye. At first, he thought that it was a cat or maybe a small dog. But after looking at this creature long enough, he realized this was something he had never seen before. Billy said that whatever this thing was had a baby's body, long arms and legs, a huge melon-shaped head, and was purple. Billy was fascinated with what he just saw, and he couldn't stop thinking about it. It was just so bizarre that he had to let the authorities know. Now, just 2 hours later, and about a mile away, a 15-year-old named John Baxter was walking home when he saw a childlike figure moving towards him. The creature saw John and was afraid and ran away. John thought that this was a deformed child and he wanted to help it, so he ran after it. After a little bit of chasing, Baxter finally saw this creature in clear view. John stated, "I was really close and I could see this thing's eyes. It was looking right at me. I just stood there staring at it. This was unreal. Nothing like this ever happens to me. I didn't know what to think. I thought to myself that maybe this wasn't safe. The way this creature was staring at me made me very nervous, so I backed up and ran away. Then my heart started beating really, really fast." Just like Billy, John was fascinated with what he just saw, and he too called the police. John's description was exactly the same as Billy Bartlett's, right down to the very last detail. The third and final encounter of the Dover Demon happened to 15-year-old Abby and 18-year-old Will Tainer. These two teenagers stumbled upon the creature the very next evening. They said that the creature was sitting on all fours by the side of the road near the edge of a bridge. They couldn't believe what they were looking at. They were so shocked that they too called the cops. Abby and Will told the police that this creature looked like a big-headed hairless primate. Now all the witnesses of the Dover Demon were asked to sketch what they saw, and the results were astounding. There is no doubt that these witnesses encountered the exact same creature. Now, due to the fact that all these witnesses were young, a lot of people suggested that it was a hoax. But this theory was quickly ruled out as all the witnesses didn't even know each other. The amazing thing about this encounter is all the witnesses are 100% convinced that what they saw was not from this earth, or at least not known to science. Now, there are tons of amazing and very credible monster sightings each and every year in just America alone. If I wanted to cover all the best monster sightings in the world, it would probably take me a year. So I'm going to break this into a series, and over time I will cover them all. One thing I would like to say is I don't think these people are making these stories up. I think from time to time, people do come face to face with something that is just unknown. Unknown to us and unknown to science. And it does seem, for the most part, that these creatures are just as scared of us as we are of them.